In the last video, I poured these metal line-through spoons to feed my new Seatrout addiction. Welcome to the Lure for All channel. Today I'll be taking my sea lure collection to the next level by making these wooden sandeels. If I can't catch them on the spoons, at least I might be able to impress them with my woodworking skills. These lures are very easy to make if you have access to a lathe and to a couple basic hand tools. If you don't, you could still make these by buying a pre-made wooden dowel in the store. For this type of lure, I want to be using the heaviest wood I can get, which in my case is maple. We want this lure to sink hard, so a less buoyant and heavier type of wood will aid in achieving this. My blank is about 1.4 by 15 cm. With my blank mounted between sanders, I first rough it out to a uniform shape, and I'll leave 2 cm of wood untouched at both sides, and these square ends will be a big help when drilling the lead hole and eye sockets. If you have a specific length in mind, you can mark that out now. I want mine to be 11 cm as that seems to be the middle ground. The ones you can buy from Savage Gear go from as short as 8 cm to as long as 15. To give the sandeel its final shape, I prefer to use a small skew as a scraper. Reason being that the point of the skew makes it easy to carve in details, and using it as a scraper gives your wood a really nice surface finish, so only a little sanding is needed. As for the shape, it doesn't really matter as long as it's round. I've made 4 of these sandeels by now, and all of them are shaped a little differently. The most important part is that you don't make them too thick overall, because the more wood you have, the more lead we need to put back in to make it sink. The buoyancy of the wood is our #1 enemy for a lure like this, and a diameter of 10 to 12 mil is perfect. This one has a slight taper towards the rear, and this is great if you want to put in some extra lead to increase the lure's weight and thus the casting distance. Because these lures are so thin, we need a lead slot instead of lead holes. The best way I found is to use a Dremel with the circle cutting attachment, and I just clamp it in my vise with a square wooden block, so the lure can be moved back and forth against the carving bit, like so. If you don't have one of these, you can still use your drill press and a guide rail to help you drill all the holes in a straight line. Here you can see why it's important to leave the square bits at the end, because it's way easier to work with these flat surfaces instead of having the lure rolling around. My lure is about 11 cm long, and I'll show a quick measurement of the slot I made, which is a perfect size for a fast sink rate. This is a voiceover, so I can tell you right now that the lure with these exact measurements will end up weighing about 25 grams, including paint, epoxy and hardware. Before I pour the lead, I'll give the lure a quick coat of super glue, which will make the wood waterproof, and it will protect the wood from the molten metal by preventing any deep burn marks. Because I don't have a lead pot, I'm using a steel lid that has a small hole near the edge, so I can just make the lead drip in relatively precise. Normally I would just drill out any excess lead, but for a slot like this I find it easier to just scrape off anything that's sticking out while it's still molten. Like always, I'm using super glue and sawdust to cover up the lead hole. I just build it up in layers until it's high enough to then sand or file it back flush with the wood. You can see it still has a little bend in the middle, so I'll repeat the previous steps until it's nice and straight. Just like that, and now because of all the filing and sanding, we've got some exposed wood, so I'll give it another coat of super glue. To mark the position of the eyes, I'll use the center holes to my advantage by putting it back on the lathe like so. Because of the square ends we left on, marking and drilling the eye sockets once again becomes way easier. With that done, I can finally part off the lower and then sand a small chamfer on the back and the front. All that's left to do now is poke some holes for the line tie and the hook hanger and drill those out. In this video I'll be painting the green sandeel from the thumbnail, but to paint the blue or the copper one you would use the exact same steps, just replacing the green with blue, copper or any color you want. While these fancy lures with the scales and all look best in my opinion, if you just want to make simple lures that are quick and easy to make, but just as effective, you can paint them like the white one. Again, you can play with different colors, but no matter the paint scheme, I always like to give these lures an orange dot at the back, because apparently the fish will use that spot as a strike point, which should help with the hookup ratio, as our hook is right in the middle of that spot. Some weeks ago a viewer commented that he caught a freshwater fish called asp on a line through spoon, like the ones I made in my last video. Of course I had to test this out myself, so I took my freshly poured and painted spoons and I actually caught a couple really nice fish on the spoon with the white paint scheme. This was my first time catching asp, or roofblay as I call it here, which are a type of carp that only eat other fish. They hunt just under the surface at speeds of up to 30 miles an hour. Most people catch these on fast retrieving lures like spoons, shallow running crankbaits and spinners. I stopped fishing after I caught, believe it or not, 10 of these speed demons in under 50 minutes, all on that same white spoon. Seeing how well my lure worked, I can't wait to get back to Denmark in spring to try it out on some sea trout and garfish. Anyway, big thanks to Colin for a tip.
Numero 10 jongen. One and bak.
Now, back to the painting. In short, all I'm doing is first spraying on a primer, followed by a bright base coat, with then a darker shade on top for the scales. Sometimes I make the top black and give it a black eye, or I'll just leave it as is. Like I mentioned, I do always add an orange spot at the back. Other colors you could use for this are red and pink, but I find those most often don't go very well with the paint scheme, whereas orange always seems to fit. After waiting 3 days for the epoxy to cure, all that's left to do now is glue in the line tie and the hook hanger with super glue. If you don't know how to make these twist wires, check out some of my earlier videos where I show the process in detail. With all of that done, this is the lure completely finished. If you want a matte finish, you could slightly scuff up the epoxy with steel wool and then give it a coat of matte rattle can clear coat. Here's a look at the striking dots. Even if these weren't functional, I would still paint these on just because they look so good. This blue one here is probably my favorite one of the bunch. Like I said before, to paint this one, I used the exact same steps as with the green one. I really want to add some more bright colors to my collection, so the next ones will most likely be pink, chartreuse and perhaps a gold and silver one. Since I didn't really measure these, they all ended up weighing a little different. The copper one was my first, which actually ended up too light for my taste. I'd say the ideal weight for one of these is at least 20 to 25 gram. I'll add 2 clips of the action from above the surface and below, but I will say that the action looks way better when you actually cast them out compared to what I'll be doing here. Please do share your opinions, questions and tips in the comments down below, and with all of that said, thanks for watching.